Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about Margaret Atwood's book, Oryx and Crake. It is the first in the Mad Adam series. I will not be reading the other two because they focus on different characters. And it seems like they explore more world building, so it doesn't really complete a specific arc. It might be able to give some insight into the perspective in which this book is trying to portray. Now, the reason that we're reading this book is that last year I covered a list of 13 books that were removed from schools statewide in Utah. And there were three specific rules that had to be, well, one of three. There were three specific rules that were stated of how a book may be removed from the state schools, and they were very specific. They were all related to either descriptions or depictions of sex, descriptions or depictions of masturbation, or depictions and descriptions of something also related to sex. It was just like another variation. Those were the only ways. And if the book was removed in three separate counties by teachers or administration, then they were reported and removed statewide. So this is one of the books from that Utah list, and this discussion or this focus is not to say whether or not we personally agree with any book removals, because that's going to be a personal issue from person to person, but it is to examine the contents of the book itself to see if they fit the criteria in which was stated. Because at least I noticed a couple of years ago when I started covering the ALA books that there was a lot of hoopla going around. And this is why I started covering ALA books, is because you had people saying things were in books that were not in books in order to get them removed. And then you had people saying things that were in books were not in books to try to get the books back in and to gaslight that there was no objectionable material. And again, the lines of objectionable material are going to be very subjective, so that's not what we're here for today. It's just to see if the content of the book is what people say it is when they're having an objection. So that's why we're here, and we're also here because the ALA's 2024 book list came out this year, and I've already read and reviewed all of the books that are on that list. They're in the banned book backlog on this channel if you're interested in them. But since I have a couple of books on the Utah list that I haven't read, I was like, let's grab one of those. They're on my backlog anyway. And so now we are here with Margaret Atwood. This is like the only one, the only banned book that I really plan to do this year because I got other plans. Anyway, with that said, before we get started with the actual review, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Leigh, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creative genius. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit the cover and the first chapter to the channel, they'll be right here to hopefully help more readers find your work. The summer reading program is coming up here, and that is where I will pick from a list of books that you guys have submitted. It'll be randomly selected. I will hopefully list what book we're reading that week, so if you want to read the book yourself as well, then you can. And those are all you guys submitted. So if you have a book that you would like me to read, whether it is your own or something you just want my opinion on, submit it to the summer read, and it may or may not be chosen. We're going to do it all summer, but that is still only like maybe 18 books, and there are currently 29 on that list. So, and the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books. With that said, we are here. It's time to get into Oryx and Crake. And what I'm also looking forward to is this book has some discussion points in it, which I'll be interested in your guys' thoughts on the ethical discussions or the philosophical discussions in this, because that is at least what I appreciate the most, is when I get a story that presents at least ideas that can cause discussion. It's got a very unique style of writing, which we'll discuss briefly when we get to the end of this, but I still appreciate that it presents an idea for us to discuss. So with that said, let's jump into the review, as always, with the first page to set the style. Quote, Mango. Snowman wakes up before dawn. He lies unmoving, listening to the tide coming in, wave after wave sloshing over the various barricades, wish wash, the rhythm of heartbeat. He would so like to believe he is still asleep. On the eastern horizon there's a grayish haze, lit now with a rosy, deadly glow. Strange how that color still seems tender. The offshore towers stand out in the dark silhouette against it, rising improperly out of the pink and pale blue of the lagoon. The shrieks of the birds that nest out there, and the distant ocean grinding against the ersatz reef of the rusted car parts and jumbled bricks and assorted rubble, sound almost like holiday traffic. Out of habit, he looks at his watch. Stainless steel case, burnished aluminum band, still shiny although it no longer works. He wears it now as his only talisman. A blank face is what it shows him. 0 hour. It causes a jolt of terror to run through him. His absence of official time. This absence of official time. Nobody, nowhere knows what time it is. Calm down, he tells himself. He takes a few deep breaths, then scratches his bug bites around, but not on the itchiest places, taking care to not knock off any scabs. Blood poisoning is the last thing that he needs. Then he scans the ground below for wildlife. All quiet. No scales and tails. Left hand, right foot. Right hand, left foot. He makes his way down from the tree. After brushing off the twigs and bark, he winds his dirty bedsheet around himself like a toga. He's hung his authentic replica Red Sox baseball cap on a branch overnight for safekeeping. He checks inside it, flicks out a spider, puts it on. He walks a couple of yards to his left, pisses into the bushes. Heads up, he says to the grasshoppers that whir away at the impact. Then he goes to the other side of the tree, well away from the customary urinal, and rummages around in his cache that he's improvised from a few slabs of concrete, lining it with wire mesh to keep out the rats and mice. He's stashed some mangoes there, knotted in a plastic bag, and a can of Sveltana no-meat cocktail sausages, and a precious half-bottle of scotch. No, more like a third, and a chocolate-flavored energy bar scrounged from a trailer park, limp and sticky inside its foil. He can't bring himself to eat it yet. It might be the last one that he'll ever find. He keeps a can opener there too, and, for no particular reason, an ice pick, and 6 empty beer bottles for sentimental reasons, and for storing fresh water. Also his sunglasses. He puts them on. One lens is missing, but they're better than nothing. He undoes the plastic bag. There's only a single mango left. Funny. He remembered more. The ants have got in. Even though he tied the bag as tightly as he could. Already they're running up his arm. The black kind and the vicious little yellow kind. Surprising what a sharp sting they can give, especially the yellow one. He rubs them away. It is a strict adherence to daily routine that tends toward the maintenance of good morale and the preservation of sanity, he says out loud. He has the feeling that he's quoting from a book, some obsolete ponderous directive written in aid of the European colonials running plantations of one kind or another. He can't recall ever having read such a thing, but that means nothing. There are a lot of blank spaces in his stub of a brain, where memory used to be. Rubber plantations, coffee plantations, jute plantations. What was a jute? They would have been told to wear solar toppies, dress for dinner, refrain from raping the natives. It wouldn't have said raping. Refrain from fraternizing with the female inhabitant, or put some other way. He bet they didn't refrain though, 9 times out of 10. In view of the mitigating, he says, he finds himself standing with his mouth open, trying to remember the rest of the sentence. He sits down on the ground and begins to eat the mango. So that was a little more than just the first page, because it was all basically the first chapter, because every chapter in this book has like a title and like a subject going on, and it wasn't super long. It was just a page and a half, so I just read the whole rest of that so you could get the whole of it. A couple of kids are then on the beach combing for things, and they run into Snowman to ask him if they found any, like, about the things that they have found and if those things are dangerous. None of the things that they have found are dangerous. It's like a fork and a spoon and just like literal garbage. But it's all from the before times, before, you know, the world died. So one thing that you're going to learn here is that this is, if you don't know anything about the book, like I didn't know anything about this book going in, is the environment has collapsed, society has collapsed, and we basically have Snowman, who is the last of the humans that we are introduced to, and then all of these other people who are Crakers. They are lab experiments created by Snowman's friend Crake, which, oh look, title. So we're gonna have a slow reveal of what the world looks like and how it got here, because a majority of this book is walking through Crake and Snowman's past to detail how society pretty much got to where it is. And then, of course, you've got it mixed in with Snowman trying to survive and his interactions, and introducing us to this new world. Anyway, so the Crakers are disappointed that everything that they found is benign, and then the kids start taunting and joking about Snowman. Now, Snowman is kind of seen as a deity, but he's also seen as kind of a weirdo because, like, he wears clothes, he's not like them, because these Crakers are genetically engineered, genetically changed humans. We're going to get into, like, some of the ways that they are different, but Snowman is very different, and Snowman has a sense of, like, modesty, somewhat, if you can call it that. He's still from, like, humankind when you wore clothes, while the Crakers have been raised in captivity and have no shame and are not afraid to be naked and just live naked, basically like animals. Anyway, so they're teasing Snowman, quote, "They ask the question at least once a week. He gives the same answer. Even over such a short time, 2 months, 3, he lost count. They've accumulated a stock of lore, of conjecture about him. Snowman was once a bird, but he's forgotten how to fly, and the rest of his feathers fell out. And so he is cold, and he needs a second skin. And he has wrapped himself up. No, he's cold because he eats fish, and fish are cold. No, he wraps himself up because he's missing his man thing, and he doesn't want us to see it. That's why he won't go swimming. Snowman has wrinkles because he once lived underwater and had wrinkled up his skin. Snowman is sad because the others like him flew away over the sea, and now he is all alone." So they're coming up with lore about why he is different, how he is different, because he obviously wears clothing. But he also eats fish, he eats meat. So one of the other things we're going to learn about the Crakers is that they were genetically modified to eat plants. They're just vegetarians, but they also recycle they also eat their own poop. And it's meant to make them not take up as many resources since, corporations destroyed the world, but we'll get into that. The kids are then chased off by Snowman when he's done humoring them because he got this much patience for them. He's never hurt a child. He doesn't have that reputation, but no one knows exactly what he is capable of because he is so different, and he's not part of their somewhat hive-mindedness, somewhat simpleton-mindedness. I mean, Snowman acts like he is somewhat simple-minded too, but I think it's just because he was comparing himself to Crake, who is a scientist. Snowman is then out here losing his mind, hearing voices in his head, thinking about how humans miss a bunch of important moments while their backs are turned, like life and birth and sex, and he screams at the sky in anger. We learn that Snowman's name was originally Jimmy. His first memory is of a big bonfire that he went to once, reminds him of when he was a boy and he cut off some of his hair and burned it because the bonfire smelled like burned hair. His parents fought about this like they always do. His mom walked away angry and Dad was like, "Women, jeesh, am I right? You'll learn someday, Jimmy. Just know that if women get upset, it's just what women do. Let's have some ice cream." And then they do. While his dad says that women have emotions like this, he's curious why his dad never talked about how men are also emotional and that it's kind of weird to him. He gets his hair cut to straighten out the messy hair that he made, and then at the bonfire, the fire is full of complete, like, full-bodied cows. Their faces, everything. And he's just a little boy, and he's listening to his dad talk to somebody about how someone let these diseased things into society. The rumors going around are that somebody is not doing their job. Parents are both tense in the morning, and Mom takes the boy for a walk, trying to get to Jimmy to understand hygiene so that he doesn't get sick. And Jimmy is like, "OMG, I know, I'm bored. Don't tell me to wash my hands. I understand. Gosh." It's then introduced that Jimmy's dad worked in a science lab that grew body parts in animals, especially pigs, and that was to be less wasteful. And it's not as disturbing as people consider, he says. He says another reason why they grow body parts on animals, specifically like pigs, is because once you're done with the animals for the growing, you can then eat them, which they do, especially in the cafeteria at the corporation. He wasn't told about any of this when he was younger, though, because Dad was like, you needed to wait until you were older so you didn't take this in the wrong way. Quote, "Old enough," Snowman thinks as he scratches himself, around but not on top of the insect bites. Such a dumb concept. Old enough for what? To drink, to fuck, to know better? What fathead was in charge of making those decisions? For example, Snowman himself isn't old enough for this. What can it be called? The situation. He'll never be old enough. No sane human being could ever. So these pigs that they have modified and they grow human parts and are called pigoons. There are other things about them that are modified. I think they're like bigger than normal pigs. And they're fed to everyone specifically that works at Oregon Inc. Farms. And that's the place that Jimmy's dad works at. And everybody also lives in this facility controlled by the corporation. If you work here, you live here, your life is here. Different time, same story as as it's been in the past. Dad explains, quote, "Still, the corpse men, the ones Jimmy's father called our people, these men had to be on constant alert. When there was so much at stake, there was no telling what the other side might resort to, the other side, or the other sides. It wasn't just one other side that you had to watch out for. Other companies, other countries, various factions and plotters. There was too much hardware around," said Jimmy's father. "Too much hardware, too much software, too many hostile bioforms, too many weapons of every kind, and too much envy and fanaticism and bad faith. Long ago, in the days of knights and dragons, kings and dukes had lived in castles with high walls and drawbridges and slots for the rampants so that you could pour hot pitches on your enemies," said Jimmy's father. "And the compounds were the same idea. Castles were for keeping you and your buddies nice and safe inside, and for keeping everybody else outside." "So, are we the kings and dukes?" asked Jimmy. "Oh, absolutely," said his father, laughing. Jimmy's mom started staying at home, quit her job at the factory because she also worked as a scientist in the same lab as Jimmy's dad. And when Jimmy started first grade, Mom started staying home. His live-in nanny was also sent away, and he was confused by all of this because he was told that Mom wanted to spend more time with him, but she only started staying home once he was going to school, and so he was home less. He always tried to get reactions out of her because he wanted her attention, and she seemed so checked out of everything. Quote, "He loved her so much when he made her unhappy, or else when she made him unhappy. At these moments he scarcely knew which was which. He would pat her, standing well back as a strange dog's, stretching out his hand, saying, 'I'm sorry, I'm sorry.' And he was sorry. But there was more to it. He was also gloating, congratulating himself, because he'd managed to create such an effect. He was frightened as well. There was always that knife's edge. Had he gone too far? And if he had, what came next?" So Snowman's thinking about how worthless his life feels now in the current time. And one thing that you're going to notice is that we bounce back and forth between the past and the present, and it's kind of intermingled. With the chapters, it's very much intermingled, and the writing style of this is you get a mixture of past tense, then a paragraph break, and then present tense when it is present Snowman / Jimmy. So the prose itself intermixes the past and the present. Anyway, Snowman is thinking about how worthless his life feels, how pointless everything is, and he doesn't want to do anything. He thinks about writing down some of his thoughts, but then he even goes, that's pointless because nobody understands writing anymore, and he's the only one that can read, so what would be the point? He also really doesn't like leaving the house very often because the kids make fun of him. He doesn't really get along with the Crakers because they see him as some weird deity and not as an equal, and they have very different cultures and very different behaviors because of the genetically modified, the lack of free will individuals, and then his kind. He can't even have sex with them because, and he does think about that, by the way, but because they do sex differently. He has no interest in exploring things because there's nothing to find, and it's just there's nothing that matters. He's just done with everything. He thinks about when he got his first pet at home. He named it Killer and showed it to this girl that he really liked at school one day, and she loved it. Later, his parents are arguing about his dad's work. Mom thinks that it's immoral and can't believe that her husband is working in this lab doing these immoral experiments. Dad argues that he's making breakthroughs and developing science to grow more replacement organs in pigs, including brains. It's going to save people. How can she be so close-minded? Quote, "Can't you be positive just for once?" All the negative stuff. "This is no good. That's no good. Nothing's ever good enough, according to you." Positive about what? That you've thought up yet another way to rip off a bunch of desperate people? Said Jimmy's mother in the new, slow, angered, free voice. God, you're cynical. No, you are. You and your smart partners, your colleagues. It's wrong. The whole organization is wrong. It's a moral cesspool, and you know it. We can give people hope. Hope isn't ripping off. At New Skin's price, it is. You hype your wares and take all of their money, and then they run out of cash, and it's no more treatment for them. They can rot as far as you and your pals are concerned. Don't you remember the way that we used to talk? Everything that we wanted to do, making life better for people, not just for people with money. You used to be so... You had ideals then. Sure, said Jimmy's father in a tired voice. I've still got 'em. I just can't afford 'em. A pause. Jimmy's mother must have been mulling it over. Be that as it may, she said, a sign that she wasn't going to give in. Be that as it may, there's research and there's research. What you are doing, the pig brain thing, you're interfering with the building blocks of life. It's immoral. It's It's sacrilegious. Dad turns the conversation on her to argue against her because she tells him to get a different job. And he's like, quote, like what? And like where? You want me to dig ditches? At least your conscience would be clean. No, yours would. You're the one with the neurotic guilt. Why don't you dig a few ditches yourself? At least it would get you off your butt. Then maybe you'd quit smoking. You're a one-woman emphysema factory, plus you're single-handedly supporting the tobacco companies. Think about that if you're so ethical. They're the folks who get 6-year-olds hooked for life by passing off free samples. I know all that. A pause. I smoke because I'm depressed. The tobacco companies depress me. You depress me. Jimmy depresses me. He's turning into a take some pills if you're so fucking depressed. There's no need for swearing. I think maybe there is. Jimmy's father's yelling wasn't a complete novelty, but combined with the swearing, it got Jimmy's full attention. Maybe there would be action. Broken glass. He felt afraid. That cold lump in his stomach was back again, but he also felt compelled to listen. If there was going to be a catastrophe, some final collapse, he needed to witness it. This arguing is happening at night when he is not supposed to hear it, but he can't help it. The parents check on him later to make sure that he is sleeping, and he just seethes because they're doing this motion to pat themselves on the back like, look, we're caring about our son. But they're obviously not really, at least according to Jimmy. He's like, they don't really care, and they're not actually coming in here to check on me. They're just doing things so that they can feel better about themselves. He also doesn't feel like either of his parents know him, know much about him, genuinely understand him as a person, care about him, any of it. It just shows, it's all just a show, and they have no idea who he really is, and that actually makes him angry. As a teenager, Jimmy takes to doing hand puppet shows at school to mock his parents. One day, when he goes home, there's a letter from his mother explaining that she ran away. She says that she loved him, but she had to do this. Someday he'll understand. P.S. She took his pet to liberate it. She apparently took information from Corpse to Corpse also, and her fleeing seemed to be aided by other insiders. Now, everyone is on edge, and an internal investigation is happening. After the mom runs away, Corpse to Corpse is getting their nose into everything hardcore, trying to find who all helped the mother and if there was any of them still around. They come to see if Jimmy or his dad knew what was going on with the mom. Counseling is also involved. Nobody knows what actually happened, and Jimmy is still trying to make sense of it. His mom sends postcards every so often as her only means of communicating with him, but she uses a code name, and she keeps it all very, very shallow. All of her messages are shallow, like, hope you're well. He gets questioned every time one comes in, but he doesn't have any answers because he genuinely doesn't know anything. He's thinking of some of the words that he learned when he was younger. They're meaningless now, and when he dies, all of those words will die with him. We are now introduced to Crake as one of Snowman's childhood friends that his mother actually liked, calling him more adult than most adults. His name was actually Glenn, but at some point he became Crake. The two become friends by hanging out when Crake is the new kid at school and Snowman is the one showing him around. Eventually, quote, Crake had a thing about him even then, thinks Snowman. Not that he was popular exactly, but people felt flattered by his regard. Not just the kids, the teachers too. He'd look at them as if he was listening, as if what they were talking about was worthy of his full attention. Though he would never say so exactly, he generated awe, not an overwhelming amount of it, but enough. He exuded potential, but potential for what? Nobody knew. And so people were wary of him. All of this in his dark, laconic clothing. Crake and Snowman are then teens hanging around and playing games together. First, it's this card game called Blood and Roses. It's about human atrocities versus human advancements, thus Blood and Roses. It says usually blood wins because it's much easier to come up with human atrocities as opposed to human advancements. That's not bleak or anything. Then it goes on to a game called Extinctathon, which is about identifying animals and creatures, time periods they existed in, habitats, species, and what killed them. Or they watch political people and they can't tell whether those political people are holograms or real. Or they watch beheadings online, or stonings, or hands getting cut off in the Middle East, or American executions that were talked about like sports games. Or they watch what's basically a live stream of some girl who would do all of her hygiene on camera and also talk Shakespeare on the toilet. Or they would just watch porn. So, like, they've got a large diet of the things that they watch together. But specifically, they watch so much porn. So that's a heavy preoccupation of theirs. They also often smoke joints while watching porn, and Snowman notices that Crake didn't respond to anything, nor did he ever seem to actually get high. He also has very few actual genuine responses, period. As Crake and Snowman are browsing porn at Crake's house, this is actually how they stumble upon Oryx. I'm sure you were wondering when Oryx comes in if you didn't know. Well, Oryx is an 8-year-old girl who is human trafficked and is on this porn site as an 8-year-old girl. Well, while Crake and Snowman are 16. Quote, then they went to Hot Tots, a global sex trotting site. The next best thing to being there was how it was advertised. It claimed to show real sex tourists, filmed while doing things that they'd be put in jail for back in their home countries. Their faces weren't visible, their names weren't used, but the possibilities for blackmail, Snowman realizes now, must have been extensive. The locations were supposed to be countries where life was cheap and kids were plentiful, and that you could go buy anything that you wanted. This was how the two of them first saw Oryx. She was only about 8, or she looked 8. They could never find out for certain how old she had been then. Her name wasn't Oryx. She didn't have a name. She was just another little girl on a porno site. None of those little girls had ever seemed real to Jimmy. They'd always struck him as digital clones. But for some reason, Oryx was three-dimensional from the start. She was small-boned and exquisite, naked like the rest of them, with nothing on her but a garland of flowers and a pink hair ribbon, frequent props on the sex kitty sites. She was on her knees, with another little girl on either side of her, positioned in front of a standard gargantuan Gulliver in Lilliput male torso, a life-sized man shipwrecked on an island of delicious midgets, or stolen away and entranced, forced to experience agonizing pleasures by a trio of soulless pixies. The guy's distinguishing features were concealed. Bags with eye holes over the head, surgical tape over the tattoos and scars. Few of these types wanted to be spotted by the folks back home, though the possibility of detection must have been part of the thrill. The act involved whipped cream and a lot of licking. The effect was both innocent and obscene. The three of them were going over the guy with a kittenish tongues and their tiny fingers, giving him a thorough workout of the sounds of moans and giggles. The giggles must have been recorded, because they weren't coming from the three girls. They all looked frightened, and one of them was crying. So this is great. You have to recall, Crake and Snowman are watching child porn for fun in their free time. They didn't accidentally come to this website. Crake was like, hey, let's look at Hot Tots, which already sounds sussy. And then here they are. While Oryx is in this scene, at some point she looks directly at the camera, and Jimmy feels like she is looking directly at him, breaking that third dimension. Crake takes a screenshot of that moment and prints it out for Jimmy to taunt him with it, even if it leave a trail. He's like, but don't you want this picture of her? It's like a very special moment. Isn't it a special moment? And he takes it. It was in that moment, with Oryx looking directly at him, that Snowman decided he felt bad cranking it to children, and he wished that he could save Oryx. We don't know how they eventually meet yet. It skips forward to them looking at this image of Oryx, and Oryx asking him why he even kept it, and him asking what she was thinking in that moment when she was looking at the camera. She doesn't really want to answer it. She doesn't really want to talk about that time in her life, but he keeps probing until she finally is saying that she was thinking if she ever had the chance, it wouldn't be her on her knees. This is after she denied that the image was her in the first place. Obviously, it's not something that she's proud of. It's something she wants to avoid, and it's something that even Snowman called criminal, cranking it. But here we are. Back to the contemporary period, Snowman threatens some kids that are bothering him, calls them toast, and then explains what toast is. Snowman is then thinking about how he likes broken women because then he can appreciate them and they appreciate him and treat him better during sex. Then he is being brought fish as tribute by the Crakers and is telling them some made-up version of an origin story of where the Crakers came from. Snowman is then in the woods and he's getting chased by some dog creatures up a tree. He's thinking about Crake. He is also thinking about Oryx and jacks off in the dark by himself as he thinks about this woman. Switching time periods again, Snowman probes Oryx for her past while feeding her pizza. He says that he had a different story than Crake, and everyone else had a different story about her past. She was sold by her mother into child sex slavery as a girl from a village in India. The village women helped prepare her for the sale, hoping to spare their own children. It just feels like a short version of the book Sold, which we read on this channel last year. Oryx's mom is then mad that she didn't ask for more at the sale, but not that bad because children were pretty much sold for food and now they were going to be taken care of. They had a bit of money. We spent a good section of a couple of chapters now just detailing Oryx's trafficking story, like they're traveling through things with this person that is being called Uncle now. and he is the one who bought Oryx and her brother. He's lying about who he is and how dangerous everything is. Like, if they try to get away, he's like, you're gonna die, definitely gonna die if you try to run away, so don't run away. I am protecting you. The forest will kill you for running away. And everyone is scared and peeing themselves as they sleep and travel. The kids start out by selling flowers in popular places. Once they get to their destination, Oryx's brother isn't very good at it, and so the traffickers say they might sell the brother to do something more useful, like to a pimp, quote. They described in detail what these men would do. They laugh about it. He would be a melon bum boy, they said. That's what boys like him were called. Firm and round on the outside, soft and sweet on the inside. A nice melon bum for anyone who paid. Either that, or he would be put to work as a messenger, sent from street to street, doing errands for gamblers, and that was the hard work and very dangerous because the rival gamblers would kill you. Or he could be a messenger and a melon boy, both. That was the most likely thing. This is what caused her brother to eventually run away. If he was ever caught or not, Oryx doesn't know because she never saw him again. And shortly after that, Oryx is prostituted out to an old man for the first time. Or at least it seems like she's like given to him for some time, but then like Uncle comes in and beats the door down. So old man apparently did not pay for the time to the sexy time. Quote, Oryx was obedient and did what she was told. She had a general idea of what else the men might want. The other children already knew about such things and discussed them freely and laughed about them. People paid a lot of money for this kind of thing this man wanted, and there were special places in the city for men like him to go. But some wouldn't go there because it was too public and they were ashamed and they foolishly wanted to arrange things for themselves, and this man was one of that kind. So Oryx knew the man would now take off his clothes, or some of them, and he did, and seemed pleased when she stared at his penis, which was long and hairy like himself, with a bend in it like a little elbow. Then he kneeled down so that he was on her level, with his face right in hers. What did his face look like? Oryx couldn't remember. She could remember the singularity of his penis, but not the singularity of his face. It was like no face, she said. It was all soft like a dumpling. There was a big nose on it, a carrot nose, a long white penis nose. She laughed, holding her two hands over her mouth. Not like your nose, Jimmy, she added in case he felt self-conscious. Your nose is beautiful. It's a sweet nose, believe me. This, obviously, like I said, was not supposed to be happening, so Uncle N comes in and stops it before it goes any further. Uncle N is then killed by someone, and Oryx is taken/trafficked by someone else, which turns into making CSAM with other girls and women, and also watching other people get it on. She talks about how even the cameraman wanted to sleep with her, quote, Oryx said that she had many chances to see that old carrot up close, because Jack wanted to do movie things with her when there were no movies. Then he would be sad and tell her that he was sorry. That was puzzling. Jack, this cameraman that abused her, also taught her English, and she was grateful. Snowman is upset that Oryx isn't upset about her abuse, and she's like, what would you like me to feel instead, huh? It just happened. It just happened, and if it didn't happen, then I wouldn't be here with you. Despite Jimmy being someone who watched the CSAM that Oryx was involved in, he asks Oryx if they had ever raped her in those films, saying that it wasn't, saying that he thought that it was all acting. Bruh. She was like 8. And the fact that you're like, she must have been acting the entire time when they were doing sexual things, that is a cope. That is a strong cope for the things that you partook in, that you only saw as bad once you fell in love with one of the models. Once you fell in lust with one of the models, with one of the children. Also, kind of a weird switch for him to be like, were you ever raped in those? Because a second ago, he was super outraged about her being abused by men, and now he's like, but were you ever raped by them? Snowman is now thinking about how hungry he is and daydreaming about eating pigs and pig fat served to him by a porno waitress, and he's like, I'm gonna die if I don't find more food because the children of Crake just aren't giving me enough food. They give me 1 fish a week and I cannot sustain on that. He's going to go set out to find more food in the world like he once did. And in this world, it should be noted, the Crakers have special urine for marking territory, quote, Crake allotted the special piss to men only. He'd said that they'd need something important to do, something that didn't involve childbearing so that they wouldn't feel left out. Woodworking, hunting, high finance, war, and golf would no longer be options, he joked. So they have this special pee where they all work together to create a barrier around wherever they are. Basically like a salt circle, but it's a urine circle around their camp. and all of the men work together to make the strongest urine circle that will keep away the wild animals. So the dudes that aren't snowman are drawing protective drawings with their urine to keep the animals away. He visits some Crakers, goes over how they are vegetarians who eat their own poop as they have been engineered by Crake to sustain themselves from booty cakes that they push out, and he hears the Bob kittens are attacking people now when they hadn't been before. He tells the tribe that he is going to go see Crake and Oryx about what's going on and that they should sit steady. He'll come back with answers later. The villagers want to come but are told no. Once Snowman's going again, he's having flashbacks of his dad talking to him, getting upset, but there's no one to actually talk to about any of these feelings that he has. He's traveling through the woods and he hears the act of mating going on. It explains how Crake engineered it to work with the Crakers. Quote, off to the side, from what is probably a glade where the tents and trailers used to be set up, he can hear laughter and singing and shouts of admiration and encouragement. There must be a mating going on, a rare enough occasion among the people. Crake had worked out the numbers and had decreed that once every 3 years per female was more than enough. There will be a standard quintuplet, 4 men and 1 woman in heat. Her condition will be obvious to all by the bright blue color on her buttocks and abdomen, a trick of variable pigmentation flinched from the baboons with a contribution from the expandable chromophores of the octopus. As Crake used to say, think of an adaptation, any adaptation, and some animal somewhere will have thought of it first. Since it's only the blue tissue and the pheromones released by it that stimulate the males, there is no unrequited love these days. No more thwarted lust, no more shadows between the desire and the act. Courtship begins at the first whiff, the first faint blush of azure, with the males presenting flowers to the females, just as male penguins present round stones, said Crake, or the male silverfish presents sperm packets. At the same time, they indulge in musical outbursts like songbirds. Their penises turn bright blue to match the blue abdomens of the females, and they do a sort of blue dick dance number, erect members waving to and fro in unison, in time to the foot movements and the singing, a feature suggested to Crake by the sexual symphoring of crabs. From amongst the floral tributes, the female chooses 4 flowers, and the sexual ardor of the unsuccessful candidate dissipates immediately with no hard feelings left. Then, when the blue of her abdomen has reached its deepest shade, the female and the quartet find a secluded spot and go at it until the woman becomes pregnant and her blue coloring fades. And that is that. No more no means yes anyway, thinks Snowman. No more prostitution, no sexual abuse of children, no haggling over the prices, no pimps, no sex slaves, no more rape. The 5 of them will roister for hours, 3 of the men standing guard and doing the singing and shouting, while the 4th one copulates, turn and turn about. Crake has equipped these women with the ultra-strong vulvas, extra skin layers, extra muscles, so that they can sustain these marathons. It's no longer matters who the father of the inevitable child may be, since there's no more property to inherit, no father-son loyalty required for war. Sex is no longer a mysterious rite, viewed with ambivalence or downright loathing, conducted in the dark and inspiring suicides and murders. Now it is more like an athletic demonstration, a free-spirited romp. Maybe Crake was right, thinks Snowman. Under the old dispension, sexual competition had been relentless and cruel. For every pair of happy lovers, there was a dejected onlooker, the one excluded. Love was its own transparent bubble dome. You could see the 2 inside it, but you couldn't get it there yourself. That had been a milder form, the single man at the window drinking himself into oblivion to the mournful strains of a tango. But such things could escalate into violence. Extreme emotions could be lethal. If I can't have you, nobody will, and so forth. Death could be set in. How much misery? Crake said one lunchtime. This must have been when they were in their early 20s, and Crake was already at the Watson Crick Institute. How much needless despair has been caused by a series of biological mismatches, a misalignment of the hormones and pheromones, resulting in the fact that the one that you love so passionately won't or can't love you. As a species, we're pathetic in that way, imperfectly monogamous. If we could only pair bond for life, like gibbons, or else opt to total guilt-free promiscuity, there'd be no more sexual torment. Better plan. Make it cyclical, and also inevitable, as in other mammals. You'd never want someone that you couldn't have. This turns into Snowman asking, what about art? Because a lot of art is about love and unrequited love, and what do you have against art, Crake? Because you must have something against art if you are making people not feel love anymore. Crake says that nothing is wrong with art. Art is just a means to getting laid. Like, that's the only purpose that art exists for. Anyone who does art is just catfishing in order to attract somebody to sleep with. Snowman disagrees. Quote, your analogy falls down when it comes to the female artists, said Jimmy. They're not in it to get laid. They'd gain no biological advantage amplifying themselves since potential mates would be deterred rather than attracted by that sort of amplification. Men aren't frogs. They don't want women who are 10 times bigger than them. Female artists are biologically confused, said Crake. You must have discovered that by now. This was a snide dig at Jimmy's current snarled romance with the brunette poet who'd renamed herself Morgana and refused to tell him what her given name had been, and was currently on a 28-day sex fast in honor of the great moon goddess Orstra, patroness of soybeans and bunnies. Martha Graham attracted those sorts of girls. An error, though, to have confided this affair in Crake. Then Snowman has a crisis about not being able to sleep with any of these new creatures because their mating rituals are so different from humans, and there's just no physical, sexual understanding between any of them. And he would just look like a monster if he slept with any of the women. So now he's just kind of like laying there looking at the sky thinking, if I can't have sex, why am I even alive? Like, what is the purpose of life if I can't sleep with something? And I don't want to be a monster, so I'm not going to rape any of those women. We flash back then to his dad and stepmom getting married and having a different baby that he believes will be better than he ever was. Less of a disappointment, better set up to be whatever it is that they wanted him to be. And he doesn't freaking care. Fine, have another child. He's going to go live his life and you can have a non-disappointment. Then it's shortly after that, Crake's mother dies, and then he watches her body dissolve in the corpse cleanup ritual system, which is like watching a salted slug disappear. And Jimmy is like, I couldn't have watched anybody that I care about go through that. And Craker is like, it was cool. Flashback then to when the coffee wars started up, where coffee beans were being engineered to be done at the same time, and it put a bunch of people out of work. So instead of the crops like being done whenever they were done, it was like genetically engineered coffee beans, so they were all fully grown at the same time, so they could all be harvested at the same time, and it put people out of work. This created a global riot from angry workers and pushback happening from corporations to shut up the plebeians, because it was the corporations that were in charge of all of these changes. And during this, Snowman sees his mom in the escalating riots, and he also learns how detached Crake is from his parents dying, his dad's suicide. His dad commits suicide. His dad was also a high-level scientist at the time. Snowman is then at university/art school and is sleeping with a bunch of different girls by lying to them. Some of them are crazy, but it doesn't really matter. He says that he loves them, but it's kind of like, I like them, sort of. And he's made up stories about how his mother disappeared to get sympathy, and that sympathy is never given to him by Oryx, and he is wondering if that made her different than anybody else. Now, it is during the university days that Crake and Snowman separate, because obviously Snowman goes to art school and Crake actually goes to science school, which is described as, quote, Watson Crick was known to the students there as Asperger's U because of the high percentage of brilliant weirdos that strolled and hopped and lurched through its corridors. Demi-autistic, genetically speaking, single-track, tunnel-visioned minds, a marked degree of social ineptitude, these were not your sharp dressers, and luckily for everyone there, a high tolerance for mildly deviant public behavior. So my guess is that he got into genetically engineering love out of people because he couldn't really find a utility for it and really didn't understand it. Snowman is visiting Crake in college and talking about animal genetics like, quote, It's sort of like a chicken hookworm, said Crake. No need to add growth hormones, said the woman. The high growth rate's built in. You get chicken breasts in 2 weeks. That's a 3-week improvement of the most efficient, low-light, high-density chicken farming operation so far devised. And the animal welfare freaks won't be able to say a word because this thing feels no pain. It is during his time in college that we get to see Crake basically get his mindset from, which is like just de-aliving the living, honestly. For what purpose? I don't know. It's a genetic operation to change everything and become God. I've always wondered what they think they're doing what I've always wondered what books think that they're doing or what these characters think that they're doing and how they think they're helping by doing this. I briefly mentioned it with Stuart Turton's book, The Last Murder at the End of the World, because it was also a completely replace humanity with this other version of humans that are theoretically peaceful, but like also sucking out the humanity of them because they like couldn't do art either. They could just regurgitate what they'd already had. But we'll circle back to this conversation at the end of the video. Until then, quote, they were standing in front of a series of cages. Each contained a dog. There were many different breeds and sizes, but all were gazing at Jimmy with eyes of love. All were wagging their tails. It's a dog pound, said Jimmy. Not quite, said Crake. Don't go beyond the guardrail. Don't stick your hand in. They look friendly enough, said Jimmy. His old longing for a pet came over him. Are they for sale? They aren't dogs. They just look like dogs. They're wolvogs. They're bred to deceive. Reach out to pet them, and they'll take your hand off. There's a large pit bull component. Why make a dog like that? Said Jimmy, taking a step back. Who'd want one? It's a corpse thing, said Crake. Commission work, a lot of funding. They want to put them in moats or something. Moats? Yeah, better than an alarm system. No way of disarming these guys, and no ways of making a pals with them. Not like real dogs. What if they get out? Go on a rampage, start breeding, and then population spirals out of control, like those big green rabbits. That would be a problem, said Crake. But they won't get out. Nature is to zoos what God is to churches. I think we can understand that Crake is up his own butthole about, how brilliant he is. Crake breaks it to Snowman that the corporations that have fixed all illnesses are also making new illnesses that leave symptoms to cause you to need more help until your wallet is sucked dry, and then you die because Corpo's gonna corp, and they gotta make that green, yo. So maybe they solved everything else, but they need you to keep coming back, so they can't actually make you symptomless. And this is also why the Corpos killed Crake's dad, because he discovered this and wasn't down for it. Crake then asks Snowman why his mom ran away, and he says that it's probably because she joined a cult called God's Gardeners. Visiting Crake, they're playing games and getting Crake's trust and seeing the traps set up for people in the gene science area just in case there are any turncoats in the corporation. They're still looking for them. Crake screams when he sleeps but doesn't remember any of his dreams. Quote, so Crake never remembered his dreams. It's Snowman that remembers them instead. Worse than remembers, he's immersed in them. He's wading through them. He's stuck in them. Every moment he's lived in the past few months was dreamed first by Crake. No wonder Crake screamed so much. Now, it seems like catastrophe really struck the world when the big corpos were making a bunch of genetically modified things that got out of hand and started destroying the environment. Nobody could get ahead of them because they were mutating too fast. And while this is happening, Snowman is continuing his way towards the rejuvenescence compound. Like, he's thinking of this stuff while on his way to the rejuvenescence compound, which is where Crake had worked. Snowman then breaks into some abandoned houses, explores and reminisces, takes some of the things that he needs, but not too many because he doesn't want to be overburdened. He doesn't want to be carrying all of it. He gets to Rejuvenescence building and looks at the damage from when the antisocials broke out. It doesn't explain what that is. It does sound like quarantine people or experiments, but it's not the Crakers, because this specifically says where the antisocials broke out, but the Crakers were led out by Snowman once Crake was dead. Which, spoiler alert, Crake is dead, Oryx is dead, Snowman is living all by himself. We're getting there slowly. There's evidence everywhere of the guards having been beaten down when all hell broke loose. Cabinets are tossed open. Snowman kind of explores around and then looks at things and sits down and watches TV. Quote, a great man must rise to meet the challenges in his life, says a voice. Who is it this time? A motivational lecturer from Rejuve TV, some fatuous drone in a suit, a gabbler for hire. This is surely the lesson taught to us by history. The higher the hurdle, the greater the jump. Having to face a crisis causes you to grow as a person. I haven't grown as a person, you cretin, Snowman shouts. Look at me, I've shrunk. My brain is the size of a grape. He eats some nuts and drinks some alcohol and keeps hearing things. It's dark. His match is out. He's out of motivation, so he lays his head back on the desk that he's sitting at. Flashback then to Snowman's graduating from his 4-year college and he can't get a job. He's got a degree in rhetoric and is trying to get a job in advertising, but just like nobody will take him. And the short period that he does have a job, he's only there for maybe a couple of weeks, a couple of months max, and then he is let go. He thinks about the girlfriend he moved in with when he first lost his job, how he brought home a chicken product once and some people stopped talking to him. Okay, so they got this like genetically modified chicken nub, because it's not a real chicken nugget, it's a chicken nub, all of which is made in a lab, and people were not fans. However, as much as people moved away from him, he would still try to talk to them and probe them about the way of the world. Quote, "That didn't stop them from speaking to each other. They had lots to say about all kinds of junk they claimed to know something about, and would drone on in an instigated way, delivering themselves of harangues and oblique sermons that were in fact, Jimmy felt, aimed at himself. According to them, it had been game over once agriculture was invented 6,000 or 7,000 years ago. After that, the human experiment was doomed, first to gigantism due to its maxed out food supply, and then to extinction, once all the available nutrients had been hoovered up. You've got the answers?" said Jimmy. He'd come to enjoy needling them, because who were they to judge? The artists, who were not sensitized to irony, said that the correct analysis was one thing, but correct solutions were another, and the lack of the latter did not invalidate the former. Anyway, maybe there weren't any solutions. Human society, they claimed, was a sort of monster, its main byproduct being corpses and rubble. It never learned. It made the same cretinous mistakes over and over, trading short-term gain for long-term pain. It was like the giant slug eating its way relentlessly through the other bioforms on the planet, grinding up life and earth and shitting it out to its backside in the form of pieces of manufactured and soon-to-be obsolete plastic junk. Like your computers? Murmured Jimmy. "The ones that you do your art on?" Snowman got a job for a brief time at a place called A New You, which was a rejuvenation center of sorts, but it was a place his girlfriend had ended up killing herself because of. Bad guidance and all of that, because the counselor was just not good and misled her, and she offed herself. He offers to quit his job if she wants him to, and she tells him no. Jimmy is then moved into the housing controlled by his new job, because everybody lives at their job. Their home is controlled by their work. Not a good situation. And he's got his job in rhetoric. Rhetoric sells the services. Quote, "Cosmetic creams, workout equipment, jolt bars to build up your muscle scape into a breathtaking marvel of sculpted granite, pills to make you fatter, thinner, hairier, balder, whiter, browner, blacker, yellower, sexier, and happier." It was his task to describe and extol, to present the vision of what, oh, so easily could come to be. Hope and fear, desire and revulsion, these were his stocks in trade. On those he rang in changes. Once in a while he'd make up a word. Tensicity, fabric conscious, phenomenal, but he never once got caught out. His proprietors liked those kinds of words in the small print on packages because they sounded scientific and had a convincing effect. However, Snowman is not liking or enjoying the corporate life that he is living, and Snowman also now has a kid half-brother by his stepmom and dad, and he imagines all of the things that his parents will want from that kid and envies the attention that the kid is getting, telling himself that he doesn't envy it. He never wanted that attention, but he really does. He's trading around lovers, mostly women cheating on their partners with him, and staying inside of the compound because it's too dangerous to leave. Snowman's failing at life, can't get a job again, his lovers don't have time for him, the world is going to crap even more, and he's watching news programs that are busting people for having bought sex slaves from overseas, and all of these guys are getting off scot-free because the sex slaves won't say anything bad about their captors as they are being taken care of. One of them he recognizes to be Oryx. The judge then orders the man who had purchased Oryx to send her to school immediately, and that is like his only repercussions that he got for purchasing a human being. A bunch of protesters are then caught and executed on TV. One of them is Snowman's mother. She's just older now. Of course, because his mother showed up, he's talked to by the Corpos again to see if he knows anything, which he does not. He has no contact with his mother. Thinking back to some other time, he imagines himself to be a pigoon and wishes that he could hide from everything like an animal burrowing into the ground, thinking of how he wants what they have, which is the silence to escape society. He is then going around the facility, eating, looking at the sights, having memories, and he hears a voice on the radio. He realizes that he's been gone for a few days and he needs to get back to the Crakers before they start worrying about him, so he's heading out. We flash back then to Crake showing up at Snowman's door and inviting him to come out for a drink, talks to him about work as things are getting worse, and Crake offers Snowman a job with him. Crake, as you might imagine, is kind of heavy in the genetic engineering science department. Snowman leaves his previous job with a generous severance package and is seeing just how far Crake's fingers stretch into everything, because it seems a lot of people know Crake. A lot of people want to impress Crake. A lot of people want to work with Crake. So he is like fairly well known, fairly lauded by many people. Even Snowman's lovers who were not calling him back are suddenly wanting to talk to him and leaving him nice messages to hopefully get a call from him now that he has moved on to somewhere else. Once Snowman has moved into the new place, he and Crake go out to dinner, and this is where Crake tells him about a new birth control pill that he's made to manipulate the human population to be less destructive of the planet and to also have children less, but he is also not telling anybody about all of the effects of that birth control while he is kind of handing it out and passing it around in places, especially third world countries, to test it. Quote, "The Bliss Plus pill was designed to take a set of givens, namely the nature of human nature, and steer these givens in a more beneficial direction than the ones hitherto taken. It was based on the studies of the now unfortunately extinct pygmy or bonobo chimpanzees, a close relative of the Homo sapiens sapiens. Unlike the latter species, the bonobo had not been partially monogamous with promiscuous and polyandrous tendencies. Instead, it had been indiscriminately promiscuous, had not pair bonded, and had spent most of its waking life, when it wasn't eating, engaging in copulation. Its intraspecific aggression factor had been very low, which led to the concept of Bliss Plus. The aim was to produce a single pill that, at one and the same time, A, would protect the user against all known sexually transmitted diseases, fatal, inconvenient, or merely unsightly, B, would provide an unlimited supply of libido or sexual prowess, coupled with a generalized sense of energy and well-being, thus reducing the frustrating and blocked testosterone that led to jealousy and violence, and eliminating feelings of low self-worth. C, would prolong youth. These three capabilities would be the selling points, said Crake, but there would be a fourth, which would not be advertised. The Bliss Plus pill would also act as a surefire one-time does-it-all birth control pill for males and females alike, thus automatically lowering the population level. This effect could be reversible, though not on an individual subject, by altering the components of the pill as needed, i.e. if the population of any area got too low. So basically you're going to sterilize people without them knowing it under the guise of giving them ultra in orgies? That's a crude way of putting it, said Crake. Such a pill, he said, would confer large-scale benefits not only on individual users, although it had that appeal to these, or it would be a failure in the marketplace, but to society as a whole. And not only on society, but on the planet. The investors were very keen on it. It was going to be global. It was all upside. There was no downside at all. He, Crake, was very excited about it. And this is all because humans are killing the planet with overconsumption by needing too many resources, so now Crake is taking it upon himself to cull the human population, test on humans his new drugs in third worlds specifically first, and then expand it, and be the savior of all. In his mind, okay? Now, his pills aren't flawless at first either. By flawless, I mean, towards whatever it is he is trying to do. Because they have that limitless libido thing and he is in the testing phase, they do cause people to rape animals and women specifically in the first couple of batches. But he's like, that's the price that you pay for advancement. Oh well, we'll fix it at some point. Snowman is then taken to the lab and shown around, and the people working there are shady-looking scientists who have disappeared under Crake's protection from the shady places that they had been working previously. Crake shows Snowman the current round of Crakers and explains their biology a bit, including they're improved upon humans and that they die when they are 30. Their breeding is more controlled. And then Craker is also going on about how this will be followed by designer babies, which his company is currently selling. So he's already genetically creating these humans, and then he can also choose how they look because he's already doing designer babies. Quote, compared to the Paradise Project, even the Bliss Plus pill was a crude tool, although it would be a lucrative interim solution. In the long run, however, the benefits for the future of human race of the two combination would be stupendous. They were inextricably linked. The pill would put a stop to haphazard reproduction. The project would replace it with a superior method. They were two stages of a single plan, you may say. It was amazing, said Crake. What once unimaginable things had been accomplished by the team here. What had been altered was nothing less than an ancient primate brain. Gone were the destructive features, the features responsible for the world's current illnesses. For instance, racism, or as they refer to it in Paradise, pseudo-speciation, had been eliminated in the model group merely by switching the bonding mechanism. The Paradise people simply did not register skin color. Hierarchy could not exist among them, because they lacked the neural complexes that would have created it. Since they were neither hunter nor agriculturalist hungry for land, there was no territoriality. The king of the castle hard wiring that had plagued humanity had, in them, been unwired. They ate nothing but leaves and grass and a berry or two. Thus, their food was plentiful and always available. Their sexuality was not a constant torment to them, not a cloud of turbulent hormones. They came into heat at regular intervals, as did most mammals other than man. In fact, as there would never be anything for these people to inherit, there would be no family trees, no marriage, and no divorce. They were perfectly adjusted to their habitat. So they would never have to create houses or tools, or weapons, or, for that matter, clothing. They would have no need to invent any harmful symbolism such as kingdoms, icons, gods, or money. Best of all, they recycled their own excrement by means of a brilliant splice incorporating genetic materials from... So this is just going on. Crake thanks Snowman for being there because he needed someone to talk to about his ideas and his advancements and what he's working on, and then shows him to his new bedroom/living quarters that is going to be under Crake's watch. This is finally where Oryx is actually introduced to Snowman. Crake met her while he was in college, using student services, which were there to match people so that they could have sex with each other, and he gave them the image of this girl that he had printed out from the child porno, and they matched him to her. He hired her shortly thereafter, kept his hands on her in public, had sex with her all of the time. For once, it appears that Crake actually might have had feelings, and Snowman pretends that he doesn't remember the porno girl, as Crake is like, don't you remember her? You had a thing for her back in the day, don't you remember? And he's like, Oryx is also being used to interact with and teach the Crakers about things. She is also being sent around the world to give out the birth control pills in whorehouses to test them because people trust her, especially as a woman. She also secretly has sex with Snowman and avoids any questions about her past or being trafficked, no matter how much Snowman pries. Snowman proposes that he and Oryx run away together, and she laughs and shrugs him off. Later, she's telling him that if anything were to happen to her or Crake, he needs to take care of the Crakers because they're helpless little babies. Snowman is very uneasy by the suggestion that something is going to happen. Now, plague disasters are hitting the world even harder than they had been before, in different countries even. Crake and them are trying to intercept it and protect themselves from it, and they realize that the plague that is spreading is being carried by the Bliss Plus pills that Crake had made. Everything is going down, and Jimmy is not sure what to do about it. He locks himself in his room with a safety lock, and eventually Crake comes along, begging him to let him in, saying that Oryx is with him and they're going to be fine. It's all going to be fine. Hell might be breaking loose, but it's all going to be fine. Just let him in. He needs to talk to him. Snowman opens the door, and Crake is there covered in blood. He has Oryx in his arms. "I'm counting on you," he says, and then he cuts Oryx's throat. This causes Snowman to shoot Crake. Going back to contemporary times, I feel like I keep forgetting to tell you when it's contemporary or when it's in the past, but I'm hoping that it's obvious. But returning to contemporary times, Snowman's foot is all messed up from bugs that have been eating and biting at him while he's been out, and he's looking through Crake's storeroom for treatment. He passes Crake and Oryx's bodies laying on the ground in the facility, and then he keeps going inside. He finds a bed, sits down, falls asleep. The next morning, his foot is somewhat better, and in the storeroom storeroom, he finds some food, and then he sinks into memories again, going back to when he had shot Crake, where he drank himself into oblivion, mourning in pain emotionally, and the military dudes were looking for Crake because he was missing work and they needed him to solve some issues. Then with his spare time, he goes to watching the Crakers, who are waiting for Oryx to show up, and he knows that she is not going to because she's dead. He doesn't understand the Crakers' behaviors, he doesn't understand them as a people, and he watches them have an orgy. The world continues to fall apart rapidly, disease spreading, connection between countries is going shallower and more isolated, and then he's having an existential crisis about why this is all happening and what Crake was even trying to accomplish. Quote, "The worst of it was that those people out there, the fear, the suffering, the wholesale death, did not really touch him. Crake used to say that Homo sapiens sapien was not hardwired to individuate other people in numbers above 200, the size of a primal tribe, and Jimmy would reduce that number to 2. Had Oryx loved him? Had she loved him not? Did Crake know about them? How much did he know? When did he know it? When did he know it? Was he spying on them all along? Did he set up the grand finale as an assisted suicide? Had he intended to have Jimmy shoot him because he knew what would happen next and he wouldn't deign to stick around to watch the results of what he had done? Or did he know that he wouldn't be able to withhold the formula for the vaccine once the Corpse got to work on him? How long had he been planning this? Could it be that Uncle Pete, or possibly even Crake's own mother, had been doing trial runs? With so much at stake, was he afraid of failure, of being just one more incompetent nihilist? Or was he tormented by jealousy? Was he addled by love? Was it revenge? Did he just want Jimmy to put him out of his misery? Had he been a lunatic or an intellectually honorable man who had thought things through into their logical conclusion? And was there any difference? And so on and so forth, spinning the emotional wheels and sucking down the hooch until he could blank himself out. As all the humans die off, he just stays inside watching movies because what else is there to do, really? He knows that he's resistant to the virus, that is, if he believes what Crake told him, but he's afraid of what desperate people dying will do to him because virus protection isn't protection against people's rage and panic. Snowman finds a note around that mentions that Crake had built a virus into the drugs on purpose, and it was a sleeper cell to make it too late to save anyone, and he had destroyed the cure before the release. Jimmy can't remember his own thoughts at the time, as it says, Jimmy's thoughts end on what Crake's motives would be. It feels really cheap to me since it's just Snowman, and he could think about it here and now. My guess is that the author didn't want to assert a motive for conversation's sake, but it just feels like an incomplete story for the sake of smart talk when the thought-ending motives are the person who is talking, and even the assertion of somebody's motives or the speculation of somebody's motives could be a conversation on their own. Then he switches topics completely, and we're never going to come back to this. It talks about the time Snowman introduced himself to the Crakers for the first time, and he didn't get naked like they were. And I'd also like to mention the religious symbolism that may or may not be intended here. You have a creation story of a man where God created Adam and Eve, and they were naked in the garden. I personally assume that this was intentional, making Crake the new God and the Crakers the new Adam and Eve, as there's also a terrorist organization called God's Gardeners, and I believe that The Handmaid's Tale also contains religious references and imagery, though I'm not super familiar with it, so feel free to give more info in the comments below if you do. Here, I think the author was going for a complete replacement of God, as is typical with human plus stories, and in this, making them naked while the humans are not naked, or in this case, the overseer, who is Snowman, isn't. It could, of course, be nudity because they're seen more as akin to animals, but I still don't know what purpose that serves, even in this story or idea. Removing humanity from humans and lowering them mentally to neutered animals, because even animals have jealousy and sex more than these people do when it's just heat every 3 years. Snowman releases the Crakers and leads them out into the world, deciding that he needs to shepherd them and help them to set up camp in the world outside of the laboratory. Even if they weren't his responsibility originally, they are now, and so he needs to guide them away and give them at least something that they can try to live in. After leaving the Crakers somewhere to build their home, he comes to a visit and they're making music and noise. This explains that they're doing chanting and making art for him. Snowman remembers, quote, "We made a picture of you to help us send out our voice to you. Watch out for art. Crake used to say. As soon as they start doing art, we're in trouble. Symbolic thinking of any kind would signal downfall in Crake's view. Next, they'd be inventing idols and funerals and grave goods and the afterlife and sin and the linear bee and kings and then slavery and war. Snowman longs to question them. Who had first had the idea of making a reasonable facsimile of him, of Snowman, out of a jar lid and a mop? But that would have to wait. Absolutely sure that when he's listening to them do their chanting, they're not saying amen, because Crake considered religion of any kind to be a ruinous contaminant and kept it away from his human pluses. So we also see that if we have any creative thought of any kind, then it leads to the downfall of humankind. At least that was Crake's opinion. So I ask, what's the point of people in Crake's perspective, in the perspective of whatever he sees humans being able to do, if people are just lobotomized individuals who only procreate once every 3 years? But what is it that they offer to the world? They're not conservationists because they don't understand anything. They're nothing. They're not creative. They can't build. They don't do anything. There is no function in the ecosystem like animals have. Crake did try to kill everyone with his pills, because he wanted to replace humankind with his humankind plus, because he obviously was not feeding the Crakers his pills. The Crakers were to take over for humans. But, like, why do the Crakers exist? What exactly are they? What is the benefit of people when you hate people as much as Crake does? The people are obviously turning Snowman into an idol, and there is nothing that he can do about it. They now have a picture to worship and are going to bring him offerings of a fish on the regular. The Crakers saw 3 strangers who were like Snowman, all clothed up, not like them, and they freaked out seeing the Craker ritual. Snowman wants to keep the Crakers away from these strangers because the only thing that humans could do to Crakers is destroy them, be violent, etc. So he starts angsting. Snowman then finds footprints on the beach, and he follows them to some people who are cooking animals. He doesn't know what to do. Obviously, if they're eating animals, then they're not Crakers, because Crakers are vegetarians. Now he has a decision to make, and this is where the story ends. So I guess where we can call this is that even though Crake thought that he had done enough damage to everything to kill everybody, he did not. And obviously we know that he got himself killed on purpose, or assisted suicide on purpose, because he set up people to be killed, and he didn't want to be brought back into the lab to have to come up with a cure, because he was trying to get rid of humanity as a whole. So, getting into the ending comments here, the genre and audience for this, I see it as adult, dystopian, it is literary. I don't know what else to say about that. The hook, the opening of this book mostly focuses on introducing Snowman / Jimmy, his life, personality, background, interspersed flashbacks with him sort of trudging around in the current time, flashing the before times and the current times. In the first 50 pages, we're not really given in any way what he is doing. He's just sort of existing, which gives this book the feeling that it exists to show you the world and to show you the point that it's trying to make. And it's more about that and what Crake is doing and the reflections on what Crake did and the life that Snowman lived in, as opposed to like being a story with a plot. All I can tell you from the first 50 pages is that it is a story of having survived the end of the world and then showing you the world that the author had created. In the first 50 pages, we have heard the names Crake and Oryx, but we don't know much about them. We know that Oryx was in a close relationship with Snowman because she does kiss him in those first 50 pages, but we don't know much about them. We also get that the story is going to heavily involve corporations and genetic engineering because Snowman's parents both worked for corporations, were both involved with genetic engineering, and dad was genetically engineering and mom was upset about it and quit and was trying to get dad to quit, and they fought about that, and she joined anti-corporation, anti-genetic groups. So obviously, like, this story is the downfall of society and how it happened. And not a lot of answers because there was no finding why Crake did anything that Crake did. The writing / language. The only thing that I really have to say about it is that it does feel pretentious in every way that it is written, and it is hard. It was hard for me to get into. Here is a quote that I wanted to share when I read it, just to give you an idea of some of it. Quote, "What is toast?" says Snowman to himself once they ran off. "Toast is when you take a piece of bread. What is bread? Bread is when you take some flour. What is flour? We'll skip that part. It's too complicated. Bread is something that you can eat, made from the ground up plant and shaped like a stone. You cook it, please. Why do you cook it? Why don't you just eat the plant? Never mind that part. Pay attention. You cook it, and then you cut it into slices, and you put a slice into the toaster, which is a metal box that heats up with electricity. What is electricity? Don't worry about that. When the slice is in the toaster and you get to the butter, butter is a yellow grease made from the mammary glands of skip the butter. So the toaster turns the slice of bread black on both sides with smoke coming out, and then this toaster shoots the slice into the air and it falls onto the floor. Forget it, says Snowman. Oh, let me try again. Toast was a pointless invention from the Dark Ages. Toast was an implement of torture that caused all of those subjected to it to regurgitate its verbal form the sins and crimes of their past lives. Toast was a ritual item devoured by fetishists in the belief that it would enhance their kinetic and sexual powers. Toast cannot be explained by any rational means. Toast is me. I am toast. What? I didn't know toast was fetish, but here we are. It goes back and forth in the blurbs with past tense and present tense depending on whether it is reflecting or present, but then you also have times where it's still in the past, but it is in the present past, where it's like when he's talking, when Snowman is talking to Oryx about her being sex traded, and she's talking in past tense to share what happened, and then it's talking in present tense because he's actively asking her questions while she's telling a story, but that is still the past because Oryx is obviously dead. Once you get the feel of it, you kind of start getting it, but it is kind of, it's something to get into. At least it took a bit of time for me to get into it. Descriptions. Generally, they feel random, the sort of random that gets slated as literary fiction because it's nonsense and people go, I am toast? That's deep. It didn't really build any pictures for me. It didn't mean anything most of the time, so World building is kept fairly vague, and it kind of just, which is fine. It doesn't have to explain everything. I don't have a whole lot to say on the world building because it's just like everything has died, and I believe it. I believe that you have created creatures that turn blue in the pecker when they are ready to have children. That's it. For characters, there really isn't too much of a character focus, and I can't say that any of the characters are particularly strong. They all feel like tools in order to make some sort of statement. So Snowman is just the stand-in for the last of humanity that has existed, and somebody who stood by kind of mediocre in general so that he could be pushed up against Crake, who is the intelligent one of them all, who is the one changing the world, because obviously since Crake died, he needed somebody to witness what he was doing, and that was Snowman. So Snowman is fairly milquetoast in general, though he does like reflect on his failures of life. And then you have Oryx, who is also, she's very distant. So you've got Crake, who obviously doesn't care about anybody or anything. He's just doing his own thing, and he sees people as anything that can experiment on. I think he sees himself as better than everybody else. And obviously he is separated emotionally because he watched his mother dissolve and had no emotions, watched his dad get killed by the corporation he worked for and had no emotions. And so he kind of just is doing his own thing. Crake may just dislike humanity. I mean, obviously he dislikes humanity. And then Oryx is distant. She's distant. She is a tool. She's barely there. She is only mentioned in having sex with both Crake and Snowman and being on a porno site. She doesn't really have her own personality, though the most personality she shows is her not wanting to talk about her background. But she is hardly in this. The story is more about Crake and Snowman and their relationship, since their relationship is the thing that matters to the plot of the story. I do find it very strange that if you look at the blurb of this book, it describes it as being a love story, like an enrapturing love story. And there is no love story between Snowman and Oryx. Are you joking me? I also find it kind of sussy when you've got somebody who finds a girl on a child porn website, and that is the start of their romance, which she is 8 years old, and she's blowing off a guy because she's being forced to lick an old man's balls with two other girls. But, okay, publisher, that's a choice. On the dialogue, it is so focused on being lyrical and literary that the dialogue, it feels underutilized to me. Some of it was mixed in with italics or thoughts instead of just being said, but overall the dialogue was just sort of happening. It wasn't great or not great. It was just kind of there when whatever. For the plot seems to be Snowman walking to get food from Rejuve Essence. Yeah, Rejuve Essence, where Crake used to work. He's just living in this apocalyptic place, and the plot of this book is to just show you the world in which he lives and how he got there. I do have this tip from Margaret Atwood, quote, "When jumping off a bridge, clench your bum so that the water won't rush up your anus. When drowning in quicksand, take a ski pole." You're welcome. I brought you that. Finally, for overall, themes discussing the humans are the worst, destruction of environment, somehow changing people. But it's worth it to note that generally when this happens, the ecosystem is messed up because humans aren't supposed to work like this. So humans do provide something, especially conservation, and also humans can ruin environments, but it's not all that humans do, and humans do provide a service of stewardship when they choose to. These sorts of books remove any nuance and complications of what humanity causes or what humanity provides with their own life, basically creating human-like creatures that have less freedom than animals by how controlled they are by other humans. The purpose of humanity never seems to be discussed in these stories. If you think about the last murder at the end of the world, that was also creating genetically altered humans who weren't violent. What is the outcome of all this? Like, I know that I can approach any of this with, like, people want to remove the hostility or what is essentially all of the bad stuff about humans. But the reason that you have the bad stuff is because people have free will and the opportunity to choose. And so if you remove what makes a human, or even because animals have the opportunity to choose, if I tell Tate to come, he looks at me and decides if that's what he wants to do. Animals decide whether or not to take risks. So when you have a human species, a human variation species that has less ability to consider options and make decisions because their brains have just been lobotomized to the point that they're not allowed to do that anymore, to the point that they can't make jokes, the point they can't make art, the point that they can't reflect. They just have orgies all the time. What is the point of humanity? What is the end goal of this? What is it that Crake is trying to accomplish, and for what purpose? How does it help anything? That is my question. And that's the question that I want to ask you is, like, in stories like this, or in situations where people are like, let's make humans, but also deny them the humanity, what is it that they are supposed to do? Because for me, it takes away what is essentially like the human experience, what is beautiful about humans. And it comes with like disaster, but humans are beautiful when they want to be, albeit that's more complicated than I want to put at the end of this video. But now I will admit that this book is set up in a dystopia, and that personally, I still see these human-like creatures as insulting to what they are. They survive on eating their own poop, as everything is more important than humans are, so it's just kind of like on top of all of the other insults, eat shit, humans. It's all to protect the environment. So in a way, this enslaves humans to someone who sees themselves as the most righteous to protect everything but humans at the expense of humans, which you might as well just kill humans at that point. Why have a human light? It's actually kind of interesting to also consider that it bears the same question as current pushes for generative AI. I mean, other than being seen as cogs in a machine to make money for corporations, arguably it's the same thing that the pills and the developments and the genetic mutations in this book are doing. Tech companies are also seeking to remove humans from all things humans, to create things that just listen and produce without imagination of its own, and that produces product from stolen valor, but it doesn't matter because stolen or not, it's still making the corporations money, and that's what they're ultimately trying to get, right? They don't need new ideas, just regurgitation. Creativity breeds thought, which breeds free will, opposition, and rebellion. So quash the creativity, remove the humanity, and create what? For what purpose exactly? All I see is people who dehumanize humans into products who are only meant to make money. And this means that you can make money in any sort of way by stripping them of their rights, their abilities, selling them to other people, taking their ideas, taking their identities, all of that. There is no value outside of what they can offer to the corporate heads, and once you don't offer anything to the corporate heads, you're virtually useless. And you should be fed to the meat grinder if you don't obey. That's what I see. There are 2 more books in this series, and I'm not personally interested or invested enough to keep following through with this. So if there are more answers to these questions or the perspectives in this book, in those books, and you have read them, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Even if you haven't read them, I would love to know how you interpret this stuff and what you think the purpose of humanity, or the people who view humans with this level of misanthropic hatred, actually see when they look at people. So that was this book. With that said, I'm looking forward to the conversations in the comments down below. I hope you have a great weekend, and don't die.
To my children, Tommy, Ike, and Annabelle, if you forget everything else I ever said in the lifetime we shared together, I need you to remember 3 things. 1. Minimize violence done to and by women. As givers of life, it's against their nature, God's design, to do harm, and every act of violence done to them is meant to break their souls, turning what should be a giver of hope into a black widow. A woman who destroys the life and the mercy of her care for no other reason but the corruption of her own self. It is only when you come across these kinds of women that you should put them down, for they are no better than the men who tarnished them. However, take no glee in what must be done. Finding any life so far gone, a black hole is where someone's heart should be, leaves only one solution. The mercy of death, and it's a tragedy when it happens. Make no mistake, a woman's love is the most powerful thing on this earth. It can start wars, end them, and change the devil himself into someone God sees worthy of giving a second chance. She don't owe this love to anyone, but she do carry it around with her so long as she's living. That is why the devil will do everything he can to pervert women's nature and destroy their innocence. Of every crime you can commit during your lifetime, be it out of daring or necessity, for every defiance you may act out against God, government, or man, avoid harming the innocent. For the day that we become bloodthirsty beasts where love don't exist anymore is the day hell on earth has come. And as bad as it may seem at times nowadays, we ain't there yet. 2. Everything you do in your life will create consequences, both seen and unseen, extending further than you can imagine. Nothing you do exists solely within your arm's reach. Think about every decision you make, every action you take, because you won't know how long your choices will stalk you, be them destructions or blessings, rumors or history been made. The truth of the matter is, your life will be controlled not by the truth of what you've done, but by the way others carry on about you. And the thoughts of others are more real in the long term than what you know to be true. It won't stop affecting you just because it ain't real, and no matter the life you've lived, most men can't outrun what's written in them in ink. It ain't hopeless though. Be firm in knowing who you are outside of the noise, and live beyond the means of the news of the day. 3. There ain't anything stronger than a family you build for yourself. What you put together is worth fighting for. Protect your loved ones with your life, and they'll give theirs in return. Family ain't defined by blood, understand that. And for as strong as the bonds of your family are, know that you'll find just as much passion in the people who hate you. While you'll risk your life for those you care about, those who find your existence to be an insult to theirs will risk themselves to put an end to their affliction. As cruel as it may seem, a man who hates you will stop at nothing until one of you is dead. It's a mistake to believe anything different. Don't let you be the ones taken from, be it by outlaw lawmen or by someone in between. The only one who'll be looking out for you is you and your kin. Maybe there's another way to be, but in all my years I've seen the worst of man, I ain't found another way around man's desire to conquer against all else. There ain't a changing of that mind, and sometimes I believe there ain't the ability for man to change at all, least of all through lead or legislation. I ain't claiming to be right about nothing. On many things, I don't want to be right. But what I do want is for my kids to live a better life than the one I did and avoid the mistakes that I made while finding the truth and purpose in what matter more than gold in this country. It's my hope that by sharing the things I learned that my kids will be better than their old man ever was, and that what I done isn't what people remember me for, but who y'all are going to become. That'll be the legend of Bill Cassidy.